This is part 2 of cleaning up the plaster mess that I made last weekend. Just like in the living room, I was shoveling all of the plaster that had fallen onto the ground into 3 plastic bins. And don't worry about the floors, they're painted, so they'll need to be stripped and sanded down before we refinish them, so I am not worried at all about the shovel scraping them up as I clean up. A question I've been getting asked a lot on these plaster videos is why I'm taking the plaster down in the first place. On the exterior walls, it's coming down because I need to completely re-insulate them. And on interior walls, we need electric work done, some plumbing work, and in some of the areas there is water damage to the plaster, so it just can't stay. I also get asked why I didn't pull the lath down while taking the plaster out. And for me, it's easiest to do one step at a time. So I'll go through and do all of the plaster removal in the house first, and then come through and remove the lath that needs to come down as well. On the exterior walls, all of the lath will come out, and on interior walls, only a few slats will come out just to make enough room for the electrician to come in and do what he needs to do. And then we will put drywall up where the plaster was removed. Keeping the lath on the wall and drywalling over it actually helps to make sure that the drywall lines up with the existing trim and there's no gapping there. In the future, I think I'll use a spray bottle with some water as recommended in my last video, just to make sure that that dust settles a little better and doesn't get kicked all up into the air. And these last few shots are just what the room looks like now that the plaster's been taken down and the floor's been swept. And after all that work last weekend, I was ready for a break from plaster, so I removed the cabinets in the second floor kitchen. Check back tomorrow for part 1 of that project. As promised, here's part 2 of taking out the kitchen cabinets in the second floor kitchen. Removing these cabinets was a little bit like a puzzle, and I really enjoyed it. There were pieces of wood or layers that looked like they should come out easily, but there was something holding them back, and so then I'd have to find that little piece of wood that needed to come out first in order to pry up the next layer. But once you did that, it was pretty easy because a lot of this wood is rotting anyway. You'll see at the end of the video, I did keep a lot of the wood. There were some pieces that were too rotted to keep, but the rest of it is sitting in a pile in this kitchen in case I decide to use that wood for a project in the future. One of my favorite parts of this project was the fact that now this window is completely opened back up. There was about a foot of it that was covered up by the cabinetry and countertops before, but now you can see it in all its glory. The plan is to configure the kitchen on this floor so that it does not block the window in the future, because you know I love my natural light. You can see there are still a couple of pieces of wood that are around the pipe there, and those will need to be cut in order to have them removed. I just didn't have the tool for it with me at the time. But thanks to one of my amazing followers, Judy, I now have a Sawzall and the blades that I need in order to come back in this weekend and get those last few pieces taken out. Boom. Here's what the kitchen looked like before with the cabinets, and here's what it looks like with them out. Next, I'll need to relocate that big wood pile and clear off the rest of the walls so they're ready for plaster removal. But you'll notice in a lot of my videos that I'm pulling some of the wallpaper down off the wall, or I'm using a dustpan to sweep it up instead of my hands. And I wanted to show you why, because this is not something I expected out of wallpaper, or to be part of the renovation. So this is a piece of the original wallpaper in the house. This came from the 3rd story bedroom. And this is how all of that old wallpaper behaves. So first of all, it's like super brittle. You can crumple it up into tiny little pieces in your hand. So if it gets stuck on the ground and you go to scoop it up, it all just breaks into a million pieces and needs to be swept up anyway. And then as it's coming off the wall, it's leaving a lot of dust, or if it breaks, it just creates a lot more debris. So in every room I go through, if there's hanging pieces, I'm pulling them down, but I'm leaving anything that's like stuck to the wall, because a lot of the walls are gonna have to come down eventually to be rewired and insulated, and we'll put drywall up. So if you're watching my videos, you're not satisfied with the wallpaper job that I have going on, or the wallpaper takedown job, this is why. Because we've got crumbly, crumbly wallpaper.
I don't wanna stay up all day.
While I was finishing up the plaster removal on Sunday, Dad was upstairs in the second kitchen building us a trash chute. As you'll see in a second, this is going to go right out the second floor kitchen window and lead directly to the dumpster. This design came from a YouTube video posted by the Heathered Nest. I tried to find them on TikTok, but I don't think they have a page. If they do and you know what it is, feel free to tag it in the comments. Basically, you just take concrete form tubes, zip tie them together to make one long chute, and connect it to the ladder just to add some rigidity. You can see where Dad also used a 2x4 just for some added support because our ladder was not quite long enough. Then when it was done, we ran a few test runs. There was some drywall up on the second floor that Dad broke up into little pieces for these tests. He didn't want to put anything too crazy down there in case the chute was too short or was gonna just go over the dumpster, but it was actually perfect. I am so excited about this because it means I won't have to lug my bins of plaster down the stairs every time I need to go to the dumpster. And if you've been watching my plaster removal videos, you know I make quite a few trips throughout the day. If this chute works as well as I think it's going to, when I go up to the third floor to start taking down plaster, I'm going to get an extension ladder so that we can just extend this chute all the way to the dumpster. And I'm hoping to put it to the test this weekend, so follow along to see how well this ends up working. I am almost completely done with plaster removal on the first floor. The kitchen is one of the rooms that's left, and I spent some time clearing it out last weekend to get it ready for work this weekend. This room is my storage space for tools and also just where I put anything that needs to go out of the house that maybe isn't going to the dumpster as a sort of in-between home for it. I want to bring some shelves over so that I can relocate my respirators, eye protection, and other things that I don't just want laying around the house, but all of the tools and everything else got moved into the living room. And then I got distracted and removed this last piece of drywall that was left over from when we opened up that doorway to my right. I'm excited to get in there this weekend to start taking down cabinets and hopefully pulling up the floor before removing the plaster from the walls. The kitchen is one of the last rooms on the first floor that needs the plaster removed, but I needed to take out the cabinets and pull up the flooring before I could do that, so this is what I focused on Sunday. I started by finding a new home for everything that I had been storing in the kitchen. I did a lot of the kitchen clean out last weekend, but if you watched that video, you know that at the end of the day, I got distracted and started pulling down drywall instead of finishing the clean out. So I had to come in and finish that out yesterday. And then it was on to the fun stuff. After removing the first piece of countertop, I realized it was probably a good idea to prep all of the cabinets for removal. So I went through and took out all of the shelving and any drawers. I checked in the cabinets to see if there was anything else that needed to come out before coming back through to start pulling out the cabinetry. At this point, Dad showed up for a little while and he helped me remove the microwave while he was there. While I worked on taking the cabinetry down around it, he unscrewed the microwave and we carried it out to the dumpster together. It ended up being a really nice day out, so you'll notice I lose my sweatshirt layer here in a second. There was a really cool breeze running through the house all day. It was perfect housework conditions. These 2x4s up here were kind of tricky to remove. Because the structure was pretty shallow, it was hard to get the sledgehammer into where I could hit it away from the wall. So it ended up coming down in more pieces than I planned, but I did eventually get it loose enough to get it all taken down. This video didn't pick it up very well, but where that long piece of wood is on the ceiling, the plaster from the ceiling is cracked and falling in. So I was worried when I pulled that piece down that I was going to lose a whole bunch of plaster too, but it ended up staying up there. This is just foam painted to look like bricks on the wall, and I realized it's going to scrape off pretty easily with the plaster in the future, so I didn't worry about taking it down now. I started taking the cabinets out on this wall, but then while Dad was there, we worked on the plumbing under the sink so that we could take it out and get that countertop up. We had already shut off the water, and here I'm just separating the sink from the pipes below it and then capping off the pipes so that there are no leaks. Then I spent quite a bit of time under the sink unscrewing all of the brackets that were connecting it to the countertop. And I thought I'd found all of them, but when I went to pull the sink out, it still wasn't coming, so I knew there had to be more. And after removing these fake drawers in the front, I found the last 3 and was able to get the sink out no problem. The countertop was giving me some trouble, and I realized it was getting stuck on this wood paneling that was in behind it. And once I got that taken out, this countertop came up a lot easier, but this project took me all day yesterday, so there's definitely going to be a part 2, but I'll put that up tomorrow so you can see how the rest of the project went. This is part 2 of my first floor kitchen demo. This countertop was too heavy for me to carry out in one big piece, so I broke it in half and brought those out to the dumpster before taking a quick water break and getting to work on removing the cabinets. A few people asked on my last video why I'm not keeping the cabinets and just refinishing them, and the answer to that is they're just particle board, and you can see on some of the plaster where there's been water damage to the wall, so they're just not in good shape. I'll replace them with something a little bit sturdier that will last me longer. The back panels of every cabinet were the hardest things to get off because the screws that were used to connect them to the wall had mostly been stripped, so I couldn't unscrew them before pulling them off. I just had to muscle them off the wall myself. So that's why you're seeing them come down in pieces rather than a satisfying single piece. There was some wiring down where the dishwasher was that I stopped to cut down and cap off before moving on to removing this platform that's beneath the window. There were 2 layers of wood here, and both of them had been completely soaked through, so they were very easy to just break away around the pipes. Unfortunately, that much water damage means the flooring in that section is not salvageable, but that's okay because there's probably going to be cabinetry or another sink there anyway. I just finished demo in here. I need to take the floor out next, but before I can do that, I need to clean up my mess. So that's what I'm about to do right now. Even though I'd been taking trash to the dumpster the whole time I'd been working, I still ended up with a lot of debris around the room. And if you know me or have been following me for a while, you know that I like a clean slate in between phases of a project. So I came through and removed the rest of the debris, and I also ended up doing a sweep of this flooring because there's a lot of plaster dust on top of it, and I didn't want to be kicking all of that up throughout the room as I pulled the floorboards out. I also removed the last bits of trim in this room just so that when I come back next weekend to remove the plaster in here, I'm ready to get started without much prep work. I'll be honest, I was glad to have a break from the plaster takedown, but I am so excited to get back in here next week to get this room back to the lab and to finish up the rest of the plaster removal on the first floor. Check back tomorrow for the flooring removal video. On my last video, I got a few questions about why I'm pulling up the flooring in this room before taking down the plaster, and really, there's no right or wrong order to do this in. The benefit to taking the flooring out first is that I don't have as much plaster dust on these floorboards as I pull them up, so there's less getting kicked up into the air. The benefit of taking the plaster down first, as some of you pointed out in my last video, is that the plaster dust doesn't get on the original hardwood flooring. But either way, it really doesn't make that much of a difference, so I chose to pull up the flooring first, hoping to expose the original hardwood, because I hadn't been working with plaster all day, and I didn't really have time to start a plaster project. Unfortunately, I uncovered a project that was much more involved than taking down the plaster would have been. In here, there are 2 layers of glued down tile on top of the hardwood. They're almost like peel and stick tiles, except thicker, so they don't just come up, they kind of chip off. And all of this that I was able to chip away took about an hour of time. So you'll see at the end when I show you pictures of what it looks like now, it really was not that much I was able to get through. So I do plan to take the plaster down in this room before removing the rest of the flooring, because this will be an all-day project and it can be done while I wait for my quotes to come back from the electrician and plumber after we get all the lath and plaster down. I finished by sweeping up the rest of the mess that I had made, and then I ended up calling it a day. And while I don't love how the gray tile looks, I know it's only temporary, and this room's gonna look so much better once I get the plaster down this weekend. So here is all of the shingles that have come off so far, plus some plaster mess from me today. And here is one shot of the roof that they've been working on. Those shingles on the right-hand side are all new. On the left-hand side, they just have the plastic down, working on shingling it. They'll finish that up next week. They also got half of this roof line all cleared out and plasticed up. These are still the old shingles. They'll get all those taken off next week. And here is a whole section of new roof. It looks so good. And I wish I could show you this. I can't get far enough away to show you, but they did this whole side too of the roof that goes this way. They are making really good progress. The front of the house is in the worst shape, so they're kind of saving it for last, but they will get started on it next week, and I'll be sure to post updates here and on Instagram so you guys can see all the progress that's made. I don't show too much of this room, but in front of the entryway in the house is another little entry area. You'll probably recognize this view, and here's where the room is in relation to the stairs. Also, sorry about my voice. I have a cold that's led to a sore throat, so now I sound like this. But it's not COVID, so I'm happy about that. In this room, there's just a little bit of trim to be removed before I brought in my tarp to lay it down and prep for plaster removal. I brought in my bins, my ladder, and all of my tools, and got right to work. These interior walls go pretty quick because the wall on the other side is already done, so when I was banging on that other side with the sledgehammer, it started loosening up this side for me. I kept this clip a little slower to show you the larger chunks that come off of the wall. This is about a 2.5 foot piece that's about to come down as soon as I remove the little bit of plaster that was anchoring it to the wall. And I was lucky enough to run into quite a few pieces like that in my work yesterday until I moved to the exterior walls. I'll have to make a video that shows why these exterior walls are so much harder to remove. The sledgehammer doesn't do as much to those exterior walls because they're still full of insulation, so you really have to put a lot of muscle behind that crowbar to get the plaster off. You'll also see when I get back around to finishing those walls, it all comes off in tiny little pieces, unlike that large piece we saw on the interior wall on the other side of this room. And in the next clip, I kept it kind of slow again, so you can see this whole wall ended up separating for me, and it came off so easily. There it all comes. I love when that happens. It makes the work go so much quicker. I usually try to save walls like this for last, because it's great for when you're super sore and you don't have a lot more to pour into the project. It makes it very easy on you. This whole room took me 2 hours to complete, so it was a pretty quick project. But also included in that time is a visit from my grandmother who stopped by just to say hello, and my parents who stopped in to check on my progress and drop off a couple of things for me. So I would say total working time in here was probably about an hour and a half. I also tried a new cleanup method because there wasn't that much debris on this tarp. I just pulled all of the corners together, managed to get my arms around it, and carried it out to the dumpster. And with this little entryway done, the only room left with plaster on the walls down here is the kitchen. Here's a piece of plaster that came off of one of the walls. This part would have faced the wall, and these little bits that you can see kind of sticking off, those are called the keys. And the keys would go in between the lath and help to hold the plaster onto the wall, right? So when I'm coming through and hitting the plaster with a sledgehammer, it's separating, these would have been a lot longer, probably like an inch. It's separating the keys from the plaster itself and essentially separating it from the lath so that it just falls right off and I can pick it up and take it out. On these interior walls, there's no, you can see right through to the living room there, there's no insulation in there. So the keys are very easy to just knock off into the hollow wall. They all fall down into the center there, and the plaster comes off very easily. However, on exterior walls, the homeowner before me had blown in insulation put in. So let me see if I can get some of this out to show you. Oh, it's a little disgusting. It's like fluffy, kind of looks like dryer lint almost. And that would have been blown into the entire wall. And in some cases that settles over the years. So you'll only have some that comes up to here and the rest of it will be empty now. But unfortunately for me, there are some walls in this house, like in this entryway, where the insulation goes all the way to the ceiling. So because this wall is not hollow, the keys cannot fall into the wall, and therefore they're harder to separate from the plaster itself. When that happens, you have to put a lot more manpower behind your scraping to get the plaster off the wall. Because you can see pretty much all of the keys are still left here. I would have scraped the plaster away. Whereas on these interior walls, there's pretty much no keys. You can see right through to the other side. All of those are now down in there somewhere. But the plaster basically took itself off the wall for me. I know when I've mentioned that before, people had questions, wanted to see what that looked like. So hopefully that helped kind of clear things up for you. Good morning, everybody. This kitchen is the last room on the first floor with plaster still on the walls, but that's about to change. And while you watch me take down the plaster, I figured I would take some time to answer some of the questions that I've been getting about the plaster removal process in my house. I think the number one question I get asked is why I'm removing the plaster. And this room is actually a great example of the number one reason why the plaster is coming down, and that's the water damage that's happened behind these walls for years. You can see some of the discoloration in the lath here, and that's because of the water that's come in through the leaky roof, which is getting fixed, and it's just come down into the walls, seeped into the wood and into the plaster over the years. Any of the plaster with water damage was not salvageable, and that is a good portion of the plaster in this house. Other parts of it are coming down to allow for re-insulation of the exterior walls and some interior walls as well, and then just to make it easier for our electrician to run new wiring, the plumber to run plumbing, all of that fun stuff that happens behind the wall. I also get asked a lot if I'm taking the plaster down off of the ceilings as well, and I definitely will. My ladder just isn't tall enough to reach the ceilings here on the first floor, so I wasn't taking them down as I go, but I now have some scaffolding that I'll be able to come back through and use to get all of the plaster off of the ceiling as well. People are also curious to know if the lath is going to come down too, or if it's staying up on the walls. My brain works best in phases, so I am doing all of the plaster removal in the house first, and then I'll come back through and take the lath out of every room. I just find it easier to manage if I'm doing just one task at a time. I really get into a rhythm and get a lot done when I work like this.
This is all that I have left of the kitchen. I have a massive headache. I'm having trouble breathing. My arms are dead. I'm like, I got to put my bins in the dumpster into my head because I have no more arm strength. This is literally it. All I have left. And I gotta clean up what's on the floor, but once I get down to the last few bins, I think I'm just gonna leave them and worry about them tomorrow because I can't.
That last clip was sped up because even though these videos are in time lapse, I had to put everything at 2x speed in order for it to fit into one 3-minute video. But I didn't want to leave you guys hanging or have to break it up into multiple parts. And even though I thought I was going to leave any bins of plaster because my arms were just completely dead, I did end up taking everything out to the dumpster so that I could get you guys these great aftershots. And with that, it's time to get started on the second floor.
Alright, we got a new dumpster that's a few feet taller than the last one. And I was already struggling to dump the bins of plaster into the other one because of how tall it was. So I'm going to show you, now that it's even taller, what I'm doing. First, I'm filling the bins a little less full, just so they're not quite so heavy. And here's how I'm carrying them. Before, you saw me, I was just carrying them like this. Once I got out there, I'd hoist it up, put it on the side of the dumpster. But I've changed that a little bit. So, this is how full it is. And the rest on the doorway, so I can give you a point of view here. There's a really beautiful dumpster. This is how tall the dumpster is compared to me. Ta-da! Making it work.
Those who have been with me since the beginning of this project have seen this bathroom a couple of times before. It's the one on the first floor right off the kitchen. It was updated fairly recently, so it's in good shape, but because it sat for so long while this house was vacant, there is a ton of dirt and mold that has accumulated over the years. And because I've been focused on other parts of this project, I have not dedicated much time to cleaning this room, but thankfully, Mom volunteered her time to come help me out. She started by spraying down the shower with some cleaner and then took a scrubber on the end of this little handle to agitate all of the dirt and mold and help to loosen up those bits that were stuck onto the shower itself. And she also had a little handheld scrubber that helped her get into all the little nooks and crannies. Clearly, the water pressure could use some improvement in this room, but at least she had water for this project. She turned it on so that she could rinse off all of that grime and dirt that she just loosened up. And at this point, it's already looking 100 times better. Most of the mold is gone, but you can see there is that line below the shelves. She's spraying it here, where some of that mold was still just stuck in there. So she sprayed it and let it sit while she wiped down the rest of the shower again, just to let the cleaner work its magic in that stubborn little crevice. And while she waited for that to sit, she went around the shower and just worked through every other little nook and cranny she could find that was hiding any dirt or mold. Then she took the scrubber to that crevice and was able to get a lot of that stubborn stuff out of there. But even after rinsing everything off and clearing it out, there's a little bit more, so she gave it one final spritz and wipe down, and we were good to go. It looks brand new. This is the closet door, and I don't know if there was a leak in the ceiling or something that caused moisture to build up on the door, but it was moldy, so she gave that a full scrub and wipe down. And luckily, there doesn't appear to be any lasting damage to the door, so I think it gets to stay. The toilet was so dirty and gross. I had given it a little bit of a wipe down just so it was usable before, but Mom really came through and gave it a total refresh. Just look at how white that base looks now compared to when she started. She did end up using that long-handled scrubber for the toilet, so she let me know that that is now a toilet brush. Even though it was used to clean the shower, it probably shouldn't be used for that again. Then all that was left was the door and the window. Check out this cool feature. You can clean the outside of the windows super easily. And because we'll be in and out of here with our work boots on, she didn't do a full scrub of the floor, but she did sweep up and wipe it down, and the bathroom is looking so much better. Good morning, friends. I'm back. I had a few people reaching out to me to ask if I'm okay, if I'm alive, if everything's all right. And everything's fine. I just had a really crazy 2 weeks. I had a business trip, some family in town. I just got back from a bachelorette party, so it's been crazy. I've not gotten to the house in a few weeks, except yesterday when I just went to go check in on things. But I am back and I'm headed over there this morning. My main goal today is to get all of my leak management stuff cleaned up. As they've been working on the roof, there were some days where it got so dark so fast that they couldn't get the whole thing tarped off and watertight before they left. And then it rained. So I have buckets and tarps full of water all through the house that I just want to get cleaned up because now it is solid. I went and checked on it yesterday when it was raining a little bit and there were no active leaks. So I feel good about going and getting all of that cleaned up today. I also found when I checked on the house yesterday that the toilet is backing up. So I need to go see if I can get that cleared out because working at the house without a working bathroom is not going to be fun. So I'll just I have nothing over there right now to help, so I'll take like a plunger over and see what we can do. But that's also on my list for this morning. I do have some drafts saved from the last time I was at the house, so I'll post one of those today so you have some sort of project update to tide you over. But I promise you more Elm Street House content is coming, and it is coming soon, because I have this whole week to create content for you guys, except for Thursday where I will be eating my weight in food. So stick around, let me know if there's any specific updates that you guys want or have been missing, and I'll see what I can do. Before we started the plaster removal on the second floor, I really wanted to get this medallion, or ceiling rose, depending on where you're at, down from the ceiling, because as you can see, it is already falling off, and I didn't want all of the vibrations from hitting the walls and scraping the plaster to cause it to fall off and break. I wasn't really sure how it was connected to the ceiling, so first I removed the light fixture, so now all that's left is the medallion and this little pole that's sticking out from the center of it. After figuring out it wasn't the light fixture holding it up, I tried taking a little scraper around the edges because it was sealed in some places and I thought maybe if I loosened all that up all the way around, it would come down easily, but that actually didn't make much of a difference at all. It did help me get a little more movement, but not enough to make a big difference. Based on the light fixture that was attached to this medallion, I knew there was electricity running down through here. And I knew that the wires to the second floor were exposed on the third floor, where all those floorboards were pulled up and out. So after trying to get it down on the second floor, moving it all around, and failing to get anywhere, I decided to go upstairs to see what I could see up above this fixture. I left Sophie to keep an eye on the medallion in case it magically fell down while I was playing around with stuff up here. And as I played around with stuff up here, Sophie let me know when I found what it was connected to. So I cut the wires and capped them off to make it easier to manipulate this little contraption that it was connected to. Unfortunately, because of the shape, I couldn't twist it, but that seemed like what needed to happen. So instead, we just started moving it all around as much as we could, and at one point, I don't know what we did, but Sophie yelled for my help because the medallion had finally fallen down. Did it work? I'm coming. Yes, Sophie. Okay, hold on, let me go. Can you come down one step? Just
Going slow, you're okay. My hands are here. Yeah. Oh, no, you can't. Yeah, good. You got it! Yeah! We did it! Woo! Oh, you tugging on it. That's what it looks like. Wow, Sophie, good job. That was awesome. That was so cool. Okay. All right. Sophie, good job.
You did. I don't know what you were doing up there, but it worked.
This time last year, I had taken a risk and submitted an offer on this crazy fixer-upper. Because of the circumstances surrounding the house, it took 8 months for that offer to be accepted. But as I waited, I was already working through in my head everything that needed to be done to the house and everything I wanted it to be. When I started work on the house this summer, I was encouraged by friends and family to film every step of the process. At the time, I had no plans for that footage beyond sharing it with those same people so they could see the progress that I was making. I knew the easiest way to do this would be to post it on social media, but in an effort to avoid spamming my friends and followers on my personal pages with too many house updates, I created social media pages dedicated to my house. That way I had a dedicated space for everything Elm Street House. I shared those account links on my personal social media for anyone that was interested in following along, and I started posting. TikTok was pretty much brand new to me when I started posting on this account. I didn't fully understand how this platform worked and had to consult my little sister for some advice, tips, pointers, anything she could give me when I was first starting out. And honestly, I was not expecting those first few videos to go anywhere outside of my immediate circle. But boy, was I wrong. If you had told me when I started this account in August that by Thanksgiving there would be 420 people following along, looking for updates, checking in on me, totally invested in this project, I would have called you crazy. But now, I wouldn't have it any other way. Working on a project this big can be incredibly overwhelming, especially if you're like me and have zero experience. But the amount of encouragement, support, and advice that I get from all of you on a daily basis is one of the things that keeps me going. I am so amazed by the community that we've built here, and whether this is your first day on my page or you've been here since the very beginning, I am so thankful for you. Whether you just commented encouraging words, gifted me something from my Amazon wish list, or recommended a new tool or trick for me to try to make my life easier, thank you, thank you, thank you. I never could have imagined this project and page blowing up the way that it did. But now, I really can't imagine it any other way. Thank you for following along. Thank you for engaging with my content. Thank you for helping make this project possible. You are one of the things that I am thankful for this year, and I hope I can keep making you proud. Happy Thanksgiving! Welcome back to another plaster removal video. Today we're working on the first bedroom on the second floor. To get the room ready for plaster removal, we started by removing the trim that was on top of the heater so that we can tuck our tarp in above the heater and protect it from the falling plaster. These heaters will eventually go, but for now they're still here, and I like to keep as much dust out of them as possible while I'm working. I also save a piece of every single wallpaper in the house for a little collection that I'll turn into artwork later on. So I took some time to pull off a couple of sections of this pretty paper before we went to town on the walls and just ruined the rest of it. These little sections in between the windows are easily the hardest part in any room when removing the plaster. When I first started removing plaster, I assumed these kind of sections would be easy because there's so little plaster to remove. However, it is really packed in there, and because of the tight space, it's hard to get a lot of leverage when scraping the plaster off, so these sections tend to take the longest. Luckily, Dad and Sophie were here to help me on this day, and we were able to make much quicker work of it than I do when I'm by myself. While Dad and I finished up the window sections, Sophie moved on to the first little piece of wall. And somehow, she managed to finish that little bit of wall before Dad and I were even able to get the rest of the plaster from around the windows. So she came back over to help. She is a real trooper when she comes to help me. I've gotten some questions recently about how I plan to move the plaster from the second floor down to the dumpster. If you go back a little bit on my page, you'll see a video where Dad built me a trash chute that goes out the second floor bathroom window and leads directly to the dumpster. So all I had to do on this day was carry the bins over to the second floor bathroom and dump them down the chute. We got into a really good rhythm here where Dad and Sophie were scraping the plaster off the wall, and I was taking the bins of plaster over to the chute. Scraping the plaster is the fun part of this job. Dumping it is the not so fun part. So when I have helpers here, I am always the first to volunteer to dump the plaster in an effort to make this more fun for them and encourage them to come help me again. At this point in the video, we've been at this for a couple of hours, and we're just now getting to the halfway point because of that window section. I mean, we're easily 3/4 of the way through this video, and we still have 2 walls to do. Just to give you some additional perspective on how long those little tiny window sections take. At this point, Sophie was pretty spent, so Dad took her home, and I worked on the top of this last wall. I found that working from the top of the wall down works best for me. I don't love working on the ladder, so I get that part out of the way first, and then I can come back through just standing on the ground and finish up the lower part of the wall. I didn't have much room for after photos in this video, but I will post the before and afters on Instagram.
It's so hard. Can we skip to the good part?
It doesn't really work that way.
What do you mean? I did the thing with the hand.
Yeah, no, that's not actually real.
It's not?
You have to actually finish it.
I do?
Yeah.
Ah,